Hi everyone, welcome to Momen's channel. In this video, I'll walk you through how to build a mobile auto repair AI scheduler with Momen. This is an overview of our mobile auto repair AI scheduler. It has three parts. The first part is user conversation interface. The second is mechanics dashboard. And the third is mechanics Google Calendar. Okay, let's try it out. First, we log in as a user. The beginning are some info collections. We need to tell it the car model. Okay, here I just choose some random models. And we tell it the date we want the car to repair. Okay, and we give it our location. Just tap in some random location. Okay, and now the AI will start to work. Here, it will help me to identify my car problem. I gave it a pretty specific issue, so I identified quite quickly. Like if your customer's description is vague, it will search in a database where we have built a knowledge base of the problems, and then it will give the customer an estimated cost. The cost calculation is also pre-configured in the database. Once we confirmed, it will create a task for the mechanic. And now we log in as a staff to see what's it like in the dashboard. You can see here my ticket has already been created. You can see the details and also the previous conversation with AI. The remark here will help the agent to schedule the task in staff's calendar. You can add the specific time you want. Here I just type in OK, and now it has created a task in my calendar. And now we see how it actually works. So here you can see the information of all conversations include what tools it called. And here example, it look up my previous events and location in my calendar, and it converts the time to the time zone I give it. And they can also calculate the time and distance between the repair task and my last event. Okay, here you can see it created a task based on all the information in my Google Calendar. And next, I'll cover all the tools needed in the content below, including APIs, action flows, and how to configure your AI agents. And let's just move on. One of the ways to make AI agent automatically invoke tools is that we packaged all the tasks we want into a tool so that AI can invoke. And now I'll walk you through building two specific tools, one for querying car issue categories and another is for estimating repair cost. For the car issue query tool, the input will be customer's question along with the general category of car issues. This has been already stored in a knowledge base, and we use code blocks to enable AI to pinpoint specific issues. First, we run a similarity search to find the top 10 data entries related to user's question. And once we have the results, we flatten the data, which means we condense these 10 entries into one unified output. Next, let's move on to the cost estimation tool. Here, the inputs will be the car model, which is already stored in the database, and the operation ID representing a specific repair item. Using these two pieces of information, code blocks will retrieve the repair cost for that car model. And the final output will be the flattened data, providing a clean and concise cost estimate. And now let's dive into how to configure these two action flows. First, we start by adding an action flow. And the input parameters will be the question and the repair category ID. Next, we add a custom code node. Be sure to include two inputs for this node. and ensure that the inputs from the entire action flow are properly passed here. And we have to make sure the names are the same. And next, we paste the code we've already tested in a custom code node. You can refer to some helpful suggestions on the right sidebar if needed. Okay, and finally, we configure the output for the custom node and then ensure that this output is passed to the entire action flow. Here, we just need to rename it. And we pass the parameters. Okay, and now don't forget to hit save after every step. And next, let's move on to another tool. This tool allows AI to query and update customer orders. So two action flows are included in this tool. The first is query order action flow. And the input will be the work order ID. First, we add a node that queries the data using the ID provided in the input, and the results from this query would then be passed as the output. And another action flow is to update the order. This is triggered once the conversation with customer concludes, and the input will be the information that AI has gathered from the customer, and they will summarize throughout the conversation, and we'll use an action node. The tool will update the order based on the provided input, ensure the latest details are reflected in the customer's order. Once all the tools are set up, we can configure our first AI agent, the customer service agent. The core function of this agent is to gather, analyze, and summarize customer issues, and then create a work order for the mechanic. To execute this task, the agent needs a few core capabilities. First, it must identify the customer's issue based on their description. To do that, it will invoke the car issue query tool and the cost estimate tool. And we're using the car models and general repair categories from the database as context. You can see here we have input some context as data source for this agent. And here's how it works. The agent starts by identifying the specific problem using the car model and general repair category. And once the issue is confirmed, it will estimate the repair cost. And additionally, the work order query and update tools will be used to check the customer's preferred time and location. An agent will update the work order accordingly. This result will then be passed to the second AI agent for further processing. And now let's go over the tools related to Google Calendar. If you want the AI to create tasks in your calendar, make sure you're using your own API keys. You can find the details in our official document. And now we'll focus on setting up a scheduled job to update your access token. In the action flow configuration, we find the trigger settings and click Add to create a scheduled task. The first two fields here, we can configure the start and end dates. Normally, there are two scheduling options. First one is the fixed time range, like it would be updating the token yearly. And here you can also do it by a cron job, where you can set up a custom scheduling logic. So this whole action flow will be triggered based on the schedule you define. In this example, we'll set it up to update every 30 minutes. So in the first step, it will call the API to fetch the token. And the second step here, it will insert and update the token. And now let's check the second API that will be used. This API will check the previous events in your Google Calendar. To create this API, we click Add and enter the debug mode. Input the query address for this GET request. And then we can configure the query details. Well, in this case, we will need time range, and it should be in timestamps format. And next, we can configure the header. The authorization token is fetched by the first API. It will be stored in a database, so it's available for this step. We just copy and paste it here. Okay, now we send this request. We can see that everything is working well. So we can click Save, and this configuration will automatically save the structure for future use. And let's move on to the third API. This API is for creating tasks in Google Calendar. Like before, we enter the debug mode and we create a post request. And we can find the URL in Google Calendar's official documentation. Let's just copy and paste it. First, we configure the body of this request. We can just directly paste the structure of this request, because Momen system will automatically format it for you. Here you can see the structure version on the right side. And next, let's configure the authorization header. The token will be in the database fetched by the second API. And once everything is set up, click Save for the future use. Okay, now let's move on to the last API in this tool. This API is to query the distance between two locations. We enter the debug mode and we paste the Google Map URL. Remember to replace the API access token here. And let's try some locations to see if it works. All right, it works, and we can save it for the future use. Now we can set up our second AI agent. Before we dive in, let's consider the functions we want this agent to perform. In this case, I wanted to determine how to schedule tasks efficiently based on the information it gathers. And once we confirm that, we will need to identify the essential information they will require, such as location, my preferences, time zone, date, and the task duration. Following that, we'll configure the data source. The data we need is the API access token, which the AI will use to authenticate before making any API calls. These are the tools we will use to configure this AI agent, and the detailed methods have been covered earlier in the content. And now let's define the prompt that outlines its roles and the tasks. Then how does our AI agent plan and execute tasks automatically? First, it will check my Google Calendar. Then it will create a task in my calendar and calculate the distance between this newly created task and my last event using the Google Map API. It's important to note that this process isn't linear. The AI will make decisions about what actions to take and what to skip. Now let's dive into the detail of how to configure this AI agent. We choose our model and constrain the maximum round and tokens of the conversations. And here we set the input of the AI, the information it needs. And next, we type in the prompts. Here, I'll just paste the prompts I used before. And please note that we can add some parameters of each info. These are actually the dynamic data we input on the front end, which will help AI to better understand the task. And now we're giving it the API access token. It's stored in the database. As we mentioned before, we used an action flow to query and update the access token. We can find it in the data table and select the fields. And also we can add the filter so we can tell it what data to fetch. And now we configure the tools it needs. First is the action flow to convert time. And please note that we need to tell what this tool is for in the description. And next, we configure the API. The AI will need to check my calendar, create the task, and calculate the distance. And same as before, we add descriptions in each tool. A good way is to give an example of the tool so the AI will know what it's about. We can also explain what each field is about so it will help the AI to better perform the task. Okay, now everything's set. Let's test it in our debug mode. We enter some random location and tap all the input parameters. Hit the Start Conversation button. We can see our AI now starts to work. It checked my calendar, and there is no other event, so it directly created a new one. And once I confirm with all the information, it starts to call the Google Calendar API and create a new task in my calendar. Alright, now let's build our UI. So we're going to break it down into three main parts. As you can see, the input box at the bottom, and the conversation list in the middle, and the top bar. So let's start with our conversation list. This is a core interface of the whole page. So here we're using conditional containers, which basically help us decide what the user sees based on different scenarios. So we've split this part into two views, one for the user and one for the system. For example, let's take the system's message as an example. So under one conditional container, we've set up different types of messages. Depending on the situation, the system will show different cards like car model selection or date and time selection. And we won't have to worry about default or loading states for this demo, so we can skip those. A quick tip here. I recommend using percentages to set the size of the elements. So this way, no matter what device your users are on, the UI will adjust automatically to fit the screen. So next up, let's talk about the input box at the bottom. This is also managed by a conditional container. When the user is in the selection process, they won't need to type anything, so the input box stays hidden. But as soon as they need to input, say, a location, the box becomes visible. It's all controlled by the type of message being displayed, so the interface adapts as needed. In our database, you'll notice a column called Type. This is where we categorize the messages. Some are displayed as cards, others as selection options, depending on what's needed at the moment. So when the location input is required, we have set a condition here, and a bottom bar will appear. And the user can continue the conversation with AI. Now let's jump into configuring the AI agent on the front end. The customer service agent gets triggered by the send message button, and let's break down how this button flow works. There are two scenarios here. Either we're starting a new conversation, or we are continuing an existing one. When we send the first message, it kicks off a new conversation. But if we send an additional message, it just continues the previous conversation, bringing all the messages as context. This works similarly to how ChatGPT keeps track of ongoing chats. So how do we tell if it's a new conversation or an existing one? Here, we use conversation ID as a condition for that. This is configured on the right-hand sidebar of the page. If you go to Data and click Page Data, you'll see that we add a page data called Conversation ID here. Then how does this Conversation ID get its value? When we start a new conversation, an order ID gets generated, and the relevant data from the order is inserted. Once this order is generated, the first thing to do is to reset the input box because a message has been already sent. And then our customer service AI agent is triggered. And all these parameters are gathered on the conversation page. And once we have set the page data, the conversation ID will get its value. And the results of the conversation are also saved in a database. For continuing the conversation is pretty similar. The new message is inserted and the AI is triggered again. The only difference here is that we have passed the conversation ID this time, so the AI knows we are dealing with an ongoing chat. So when does the conversation end? We have set limits on the number of conversation rounds. So when that max is reached, the conversation automatically ends. But from a business perspective, the conversation also ends when the AI has gathered all the necessary information and created a work order, and that's the logical stopping point. Next, let's look at how the scheduler AI is set up on the front end. This AI works within the mechanics dashboard. Here, mechanics can input remarks like their preferred working time, and once they hit confirm, the scheduler agent is triggered. Unlike the customer service agent, this agent is for a one-time task. It doesn't involve multiple conversations, so we just simply pass all the parameters to the AI, and it would create a task directly in Google Calendar. And at the same time, the status of the order will be changed into confirmed. The final step is to configure the permission setting because you won't want anyone to access your work order info or calling the API. To give stuff access to things like that, we just need to go into the permission setting and add a new row called stuff. Once that is set up, we can add users from the database. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and would love to hear your thoughts or any questions in the comments. Please subscribe to Momen and stay tuned for more updates.